Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into fascinating research to get you instantly well-informed. Today, we're stepping onto the court, into the world of professional basketball. If you ever watched an NBA game, these players are just incredible athletes, but all that explosive power, the sudden stops, those razor-sharp pivots, the constant jumping, it puts a huge, almost brutal toll on their bodies, especially their knees. So what actually happens when an NBA star tears their meniscus? That vital bit of cartilage in the knee, it's a common injury. It can be debilitating. Can these players really get back to peak performance? And what does peak even look like now? Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into some really fresh research that gives us an updated, clear picture of how NBA players recover after meniscus surgery. We're looking directly at a new study titled National Basketball Association Players Return to Play and Performance After Operative Treatment of Meniscal Tears. The lead author is Nosrat, along with his team. And it's just been published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. That's in 2025, volume 24, pages 360 to 369. It actually came out online June 1st, 2025.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to cut through maybe some old assumptions and give you a scientifically clear, up-to-date view of what happens post-surgery for these elite athletes. We're not just asking if they return to play, that's part of it, of course. But critically, we're looking at how they perform when they get back and what factors might really influence their recovery, their availability, even their whole career path. This study is so important because it gives us a truly modern snapshot. And as we'll see, it's quite different from what we thought maybe even 10, 15 years ago.
And that modern snapshot is exactly what we need. Because knee injuries in the NBA, they're still a huge concern, right?
Absolutely.
Meniscal tears might be maybe a smaller slice of the pie compared to something like an ACL tear, but the impact can be absolutely profound for a player. Just think about those lightning-fast cuts, the dunks, the defensive slides. Every single move puts immense stress on that knee joint. It's just such a high-intensity environment.
Well, what's fascinating here is the context. We do have a lot of research on other big knee injuries like ACL tears. And we've pretty consistently seen reports that performance often declines after ACL surgery, across different sports. But meniscal tears, specifically in NBA players, they haven't really had that same level of up-to-date focus. Most of the studies you'll find are older, maybe pre-2010, pre-2012.
And that's a problem, right?
Right.
Because things change.
It's a huge problem because those older studies, they just don't account for the frankly, dramatic advancements we've seen in surgery, or in rehab protocols, or even in how teams manage players these days. So this new study, it's really designed to fill that gap, to give us a relevant contemporary view that actually reflects today's realities in the NBA.
That makes perfect sense. So with that context, how did these researchers actually do it? How did they gather the data for this updated view? What was the method?
They were very systematic about it. They identified NBA players who had an isolated meniscal tear, that's key, isolated, and they had surgery for it. They looked over a pretty long period, too, from the 2009-2010 season all the way through the 2022-2023 season. And they used publicly available data sources. For a league like the NBA with all its stats, that's a pretty standard and reliable way to do this kind of research.
Okay, so you mentioned isolated tears. What were the specific criteria? Who got included and who didn't?
Right, good question. So to be included, a player had to have played at least one full NBA season before their injury. That way, they had a solid baseline performance established. And crucially, it had to be an isolated meniscal tear. So if a player tore their ACL at the same time, for example, they were excluded. They wanted to really focus just on the meniscus injury itself. Oh, and rookies were also excluded. Again, the idea was to have players with a proven track record in the league before the injury happened.
Got it. So once they had this group of players, what exactly did they track? What performance metrics were they looking at?
They tracked several key things. First, maybe the most basic one, return to play, or RTP. And they defined that very strictly. Did the player play at least one NBA game in the season right after their injury and surgery? Then they looked at playing time. Things like minutes per game, MPG, pretty straightforward, but also the percentage of possible games played each season. And that one turns out to be really important, as we'll see.
Okay, so playing time, but what about how well they played during those minutes, their actual effectiveness?
Yeah, exactly. They use a standard metric for that called player efficiency rating, or PER. It's a really well-regarded stat. It basically sums up all the positive things a player does, points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and then subtracts the negative things like missed shots, turnovers, fouls. And it's all adjusted per minute and normalized so that the league average is around 15 each season. So PER gives you a kind of single number for overall on-court productivity.
Like an efficiency report card.
Exactly. And finally, they also tracked the average distance covered per game, which gives some insight into their movement, their exertion levels on the court.
So they didn't just look at these stats after the injury, right? They needed something to compare it to.
Crucially, yes. They analyzed all those metrics for the full season before the injury happened. That gave them a solid pre-injury baseline for every player. Then they tracked those same metrics again at 1 year post-surgery and again at 2 years post-surgery. That way you get this nice comparison, short-term recovery and then how things looked a bit longer term. It's that comparison over time that makes the study really insightful.
Okay, so meticulous work. They've got the right players, the right metrics, the before and after picture. What did they actually find? Did players bounce back? Here's where it gets really interesting.
Well, the first big finding is definitely impressive. They found a very high return to play rate. Out of the 47 players who met the criteria, 43 of them, that's 90.7%, made it back to play in the NBA.
Wow, over 90%.
Yeah, and just for context, that's significantly higher than what older studies reported, which was usually around 80%. So that's a really positive sign right off the bat. Suggests things are improving.
That's fantastic news for the players and teams. And was it just a quick return and then they flamed out? Or did they stick around?
No, they stuck around. The study found these players continued their NBA careers for, on average, about 4.7 seasons after the surgery. Now, there was some variation, a standard deviation of 3.4 seasons, but still, that shows real longevity. And in terms of time missed right after surgery, the median was about 17 games before they got back on court. Though, again, important to note, there was a lot of individual variability there. Some missed more time.
Okay, so high return rate, decent career length afterward. Sounds pretty good, almost surprisingly good. But does that mean they were fully back, like playing just as well, just as much? Or is there more to the story?
That's exactly where the nuance comes in, and maybe the biggest takeaway from this whole study. While the return rate is high, the actual performance outcomes are, well, they're more complex. Players generally do seem to recover in most of their individual performance stats, but there's one really notable change that sticks around, and it kind of defines this modern recovery picture.
Okay, intrigue building. Break down those performance stats for us.
All right, so minutes per game, MPG. That did drop significantly in the first year after surgery. It went from 26 minutes per game before the injury down to about 22.3. But by the second year post-op, it bounced back up to 23.8 minutes. And that recovery was enough that it wasn't statistically different from their pre-injury level.
Okay, so a dip, then recovery minutes. What about efficiency, the PER?
Same basic pattern. PER also dropped significantly in year 1, from 16.4 pre-injury down to 14.6. But again, by year 2, it recovered substantially, hitting 15.8.
Back near the baseline, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah. Close enough that the difference wasn't statistically significant anymore. And distance covered per game showed a very similar thing. A dip in year 1 from about 1.95 miles down to 1.67, and then recovery by year 2 up to 1.72 miles. So the takeaway there is individually, when they're actually on the court, their per minute impact their movement. It does seem to get back close to where it was before the injury by that second year.
Okay, that's actually really encouraging. If a player's on the court, they're likely performing near their pre-injury level by year 2. That's huge. But you mentioned a change that persists. What wasn't recovering?
This is the key finding, the big one. What didn't recover, and actually stayed significantly lower, was the percentage of games played per season. Yeah. Before the injury, these players played in about 79% of their team's games, on average. In the first year after surgery, that dropped to about 60.9%. And even in the second year, it only came up to 64.2%. Both of those are significantly lower than the pre-injury baseline.
Wow. So let me get this straight. They can play at roughly the same level when they're out there, but they're just not out there as often.
That's exactly it. Their availability is reduced. They are consistently playing fewer games each season after the surgery, and that seems to be a persistent effect, at least through year 2. That reduced availability is the major difference.
That's truly insightful. It explains a lot, actually. You see a player look great in highlights, but then they miss a bunch of games. This suggests why. Okay, what about individual factors? Did things like age or maybe body type or position affect these outcomes?
Yeah, this raises an important question, right? And they looked into that. Age definitely mattered. They found that being older at the time of the surgery was significantly linked to playing fewer games, fewer minutes per game, and having a lower PER after returning.
How much of an effect?
They quantified it. For every additional year of age when the surgery happened, players played, on average, about 4.5% fewer games per season afterwards. They also played about 1.7 fewer minutes per game, and their PER dropped by about zero point 0.7 points. So age clearly makes recovery, or at least full availability, tougher.
That makes intuitive sense. Older bodies just don't bounce back quite the same. But what about BMI, body mass index, or position? Did bigger guys struggle more? Did centers have it worse than guards? Any surprises there?
This was one of the really interesting, maybe counterintuitive findings. Surprisingly, neither BMI nor the player's position, guard, forward, center had a significant impact on the post-operative outcomes.
Huh, really? You'd think maybe a heavier center.
You might think so, right? But the data didn't show that. And it kind of speaks to how basketball has changed, this idea of positionless basketball. Nowadays, pretty much all players, regardless of their listed position, are doing similar high-impact movements. Lots of cutting, jumping, quick changes of direction. So the stress on the knees might be more similar across positions than it used to be. A meniscus tear could affect a point guard or a center in similar ways because the demands are getting closer.
Fascinating. That positionless idea really changes the physical game.
Exactly. They also noted, just for detail, that lateral meniscus tears were a bit more common in their group, about 47% compared to 21% for medial tears. And it was almost an even split between left knee and right knee injuries.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. What does this mean for the league, the players, the teams? We have these high return rates, players performing well individually by year 2, but they're playing significantly fewer games. How do we connect those dots?
Well, the high return rate and the recovery of individual performance, that likely reflects those advancements we talked about. Better surgical techniques, especially the move towards preserving the meniscus, repairing it instead of just removing tissue whenever possible. And of course, more sophisticated rehab protocols. These things are genuinely helping players get back their on-court ability, their explosiveness.
But that doesn't explain the fewer games played.
Right. That persistent drop in games played, that's where the narrative really shifts. And the primary explanation seems to be the rise of load management.
Oh, the famous phrase.
Exactly. It's not just about recovering from this specific injury anymore. It's become this proactive, strategic approach. Teams and players schedule rest periods to reduce the overall physical load during that long, grueling 82-game season. The goal is really about promoting career longevity, reducing the risk of future injuries, maybe re-injury, and keeping players fresher for key moments, especially the playoffs.
And there's data backing this trend up.
Oh, yeah. The study mentions an NBA report showing star players miss way more games now. Back in the 90s, it was maybe 10 or 11 games a season on average. By the 2020s, it's up to nearly 24 games missed per season. And look at the 2022-2023 season specifically. Only 12 of the top 50 scorers in the league played in 70 or more games out of 82. That's a huge shift. It's a fundamental change in strategy.
It really is. It's like a trade-off. Fewer games now for hopefully a longer, healthier career overall. It's a different way of managing athletes. Now, as with any study, we should probably touch on the limitations, right? No single piece of research can capture everything perfectly.
Absolutely. And the authors are upfront about this. While the study is strong, using public data means they couldn't get super granular details on everything. For instance, they didn't know the exact surgical technique used for each player. Was it a meniscectomy, where they remove part of it, or a repair? That could make a difference. They also didn't have specifics on the rehab plans or the exact grade or type of tear. And, there could be other factors affecting playing time, like minor unreported injuries or maybe even non-injury reasons for retirement down the line. They also had to account for the weird seasons, like the COVID-shortened 2020 season and the lockout in 2011-2012, which they did adjust for.
Right, those external factors.
So those are important caveats. And they also point towards where future research needs to go. Well, definitely trying to distinguish outcomes based on the surgery type repair versus removal, that would be huge. Getting larger data sets, maybe even incorporating private medical data if possible, could add more power. And really digging into which specific rehab approaches and workload management strategies actually lead to the best long-term results. That's crucial for actually applying this knowledge.
This has been incredibly illuminating. So, to sum up this deep dive, NBA players are coming back from meniscus surgery at really high rates now, over 90%. And while their individual performance dips in the first year, things like minutes, efficiency, distance covered, those tend to recover by year 2. They get back to performing at a similar level when they play. But the big story, the persistent change, is that they play significantly fewer games per season afterwards. And that seems largely down to this modern strategy of load management, aimed at preserving careers. Plus, we saw that age is a key factor. Older players face a tougher road back to full availability and performance.
Yeah, exactly. And it leaves us with a really interesting thought to chew on, doesn't it? As load management becomes even more standard, as players really focus on longevity, maybe playing well into their late 30s, what's the long-term impact going to be on things like player legacies? How we evaluate greatness? How does it change team building, playoff races, the whole rhythm of an NBA season when star availability is managed so strategically? It's a fascinating shift happening right before our eyes.
Absolutely. Lots to think about there. If you found this deep dive insightful and you want to get into the nitty-gritty of the data yourself, we definitely encourage you to read the full article. Again, it's National Basketball Association Players Return to Play and Performance After Operative Treatment of Meniscal Tears by Nosrat and colleagues. It's in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, Volume 24, pages 363 to 369, published online June 1st, 2025. And if you enjoyed this exploration into new knowledge, please make sure you follow our channel and turn on those notifications. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive.